undisciplined campaign. That's from his own former Trump White House staffer who spoke to the Washington Post. It's a downright lackadaisical, laid back, or yes, even low energy approach to campaigning at a time where everything matters. It's also striking because Donald Trump is, if he's good at anything, he's been effective at driving message and PR, TV and attention. That's something he's known for. But if you don't go out and meet with people and do the campaign activities, you're obviously reducing the amount of stuff that would be covered in PR and TV. Now, Harris also went on TV and did her first big interview since becoming the nominee. It was a joint interview with Tim Walz, and she hammered Trump.
We have had in the former president someone who has really been pushing an agenda and an environment that is about diminishing the character and the strength of who we are as Americans, really dividing our nation. Donald Trump said he was going to do a number of things, including allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Never happened. We did it.
Hitting there on some policy items, and everything we've just discussed is about campaigning and the time and the places that you prioritize. Then there's the money. We are getting another picture because Harris is such a new candidate. We only have weeks as opposed to the many years of Trump's records to see how she's doing. And the money continues to roll in. Harris's team is now on pace to be able to double Trump's spending on air in these next and final 2 months of the campaign. That's a big deal. The Harris campaign also projecting confidence and trying to make up for a place where some Democratic campaigns have struggled, those so-called down ballot or grassroots races. Think about hauling in $25 million and then distributing it. That's something we see sometimes the DNC do in the years into a presidency. But she is in a strong enough position to start handing out money now. And that goes to, as I mentioned, down ballot congressional races and some local races. They are past $500 million total in these first 6 weeks. Down ballot Republicans, meanwhile, are, according to Politico reporting, quote, panicking over the huge money gap. A Republican saying unless something changes drastically in the next 6 weeks, we will lose winnable seats. Let me repeat. That quote is from a Republican trying to sound the alarm. We will lose what they view as, quote, winnable Republican seats. This is what the general election is starting out like, and it is a measure of a drastically shifted landscape. That does not mean it tells you where things will end. If you watch this program, we try to always tell you our sources and the evidence, and we don't have the evidence yet or the larger trends to have any clear idea of how this close race will end. If you hear people saying, oh, now it's obvious what's going to happen because they looked at a rally or a poll, that's fine. People can conjure and predict whatever they want, but I can tell you it looks like a very close race. The evidence we do have, though, does show an improvement in the Democratic position, in the nominee, Harris now instead of Biden, and how Democrats are benefiting from her at the top of the ticket instead of Biden. Now, we know the anxiety used to run quite high. Everyone from Nancy Pelosi, quite publicly, Chuck Schumer, more privately, Hakeem Jeffries, very privately, were talking up the idea of getting a change, of getting Biden to drop out, which had never happened before. But one of the people who actually kicked off that conversation, you might remember, back in the news tonight, is George Clooney. Not just because he is an actor or a celebrity or talented or famous. He actually was someone who had a very special role in the Obama kind of coalition as not only a donor, but a fundraiser and a kind of a national figure. And he did open up a larger conversation about this when he urged Biden to step down. You might recall the New York Times handed the mic to Clooney and he penned an op-ed talking about a theme you might have heard recently at the DNC. He both loved Joe Biden and wanted a new nominee. That was where he spoke. You can debate whether these rich celebrities and other cultural figures have too much or too little influence, but it did make a difference. Historians will go back to that July op-ed, just like they'll go back to Ezra Klein's piece and some of the other early push. So it was big news when in a movie promotion appearance, Clooney just for the first time broke his silence over the weekend with his first reaction now touting Joe Biden since he exited.
The person who should be applauded is the president who did the most selfless thing that anybody's done since George Washington. And that's true. And so anybody, all the machinations that got us there, that's all, none of that's going to be remembered. and it shouldn't be. What should be remembered is the selfless act of someone who, it's very hard to let go of power. We know that. We've seen it, all around the world. And for someone to say, I think there's a better way forward, that's all the credit goes to him.
All the credit to Biden, says Clooney. And he, like Ezra Klein, who wrote about this in the New York Times, really did open up space. There's so much criticism of what happens, for example, on the right. But in Democratic circles, there was an absence of public and real reckoning with some of the issues that led to the late exit of Joe Biden and now Kamala Harris. And the timing seems so far to be working out for the Democrats. So it's really striking tonight to just hear Clooney break his silence. He had kept himself sort of out of view. He made it all about Biden, not himself. And he credits Biden for that selfless act of giving up power. But it's also interesting because we are just 6 weeks out of this thing, or, 9 or 10 out from that first public push of people like Clooney, I mentioned Klein, Nancy Pelosi, and what a world of difference it's made. So that is how we got here. The race has shifted, and now we're seeing signs of the electoral map shifting. I told you again, we follow the evidence. Quote, just over a month ago, PBS notes in this account, Trump allies were suggesting Democratic-leaning states like Minnesota, Virginia, even New Jersey could be in play. Quote, neither side believes that's still the case here on this past Labor Day weekend. PBS is crunching the numbers and quoting Republicans. And again, we're all familiar with spin in campaigns, but it's true that even Trump defenders, MAGA allies, are no longer claiming that this kind of thing is going to be some sort of Trump romp. Now, here's Harris telling supporters, though, not to get too overconfident.
And we know this is going to be a tight race to the very end. It's going to be a tight race to the very end. So let's not pay too much attention to those polls. Because as unions and labor knows best, we know what it's like to be the underdog. And we are the underdog in this race. And we have some hard work then ahead of us.
Those themes again there, hard work and still the underdog. But here's what's so interesting about political communication. You didn't hear Joe Biden emphasizing 2 months ago that he was the underdog, even though he was behind. And the reason is a little bit of a paradox. There were signs that he was far enough behind that you didn't even want to bring up it being a tougher, close race. There are now signs that Kamala Harris might have pulled even or possibly ahead, including building leads in states that won't decide this race, so you get that national polling lead that I've told you before doesn't resolve the Electoral College. And she's the one going out of her way to tell a very excited, highly donating, highly active set of base voters and people who show up to those rallies and listen to them, hey, she still wants to be the underdog. The only way to be the top dog is to have everyone turn out over these next 60-plus days. With that in mind, we turn to someone who used to run the Democratic Party and ran for president himself, Howard Dean, and our longtime veteran of national politics, April Ryan. We're back together in 90 seconds.
Look out, 'cause here I come.
Have you always had trouble losing weight and keeping it off? Same.
Discover the power of Wegovy.
And I'm marching on to the beat I drum.
With Wegovy, I lost 35 pounds. And some lost over 46 pounds.
Wegovy.
And I'm keeping the weight off.
Wegovy helps you lose weight and keep it off.
I'm reducing my risk.
Wegovy is the only FDA-approved weight management medicine that's proven to reduce risk of major cardiovascular events in adults with known heart disease and with either obesity or overweight.
Wegovy shouldn't be used with semaglutide or GLP-1 medicines. Don't take Wegovy if you or your family had medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if allergic to it. Stop Wegovy and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, or an allergic reaction. Serious side effects may happen, including pancreatitis and gallbladder problems. Wegovy may cause low blood sugar in people with diabetes, especially if you take medicines to treat diabetes. Tell your provider about vision problems or changes, or if you feel your heart racing while at rest. Depression or thoughts of suicide may occur. Call your provider right away if you have any mental changes. Common side effects like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea may lead to dehydration, which may cause kidney problems.
With Wegovy,
I'm losing weight
I'm keeping it off.
And I'm lowering my CV risk.
That's the power of winning. Wegovy.
Check your cost and coverage before talking to your healthcare professional about Wegovy.
We need someone on that stage who has the ability to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump and someone who has the ability to rebuild the Obama coalition and bring the party and the nation together. I believe I am that candidate.
That was then candidate Kamala Harris, who is now the nominee. We're joined by April Ryan, White House correspondent, D.C. bureau chief for The Griot, author of Black Women Will Save the World, an Anthem, and former DNC chair, former governor of Vermont, MD, and former presidential candidate Howard Dean. Welcome to you both. April, your thoughts on what I mentioned, which is still a remarkable shift from a few weeks ago, where now you have George Clooney crediting Joe Biden as the new George Washington and Kamala Harris insisting she's still an underdog.
Two very interesting pieces, Ari. So one, George Clooney, I don't think he nailed the coffin shut, but he definitely put one of the last nails in that coffin for Joe Biden when it comes to ending his presidential campaign. George Clooney, if we remember, he was upset with Joe Biden for not doing something when it comes to Israel and Hamas in Gaza, what his wife offered. And at the end of the day, it doesn't do anything. It just basically it's a smooth over for George Clooney to fix this, as he was one of those who actually put the last nail in that coffin. Now, when it comes to the issue of underdog.
Well, and I'll let you finish, April, but April, I always, George Clooney was the Ezra Klein of Hollywood, and he was tied to the Hollywood money. There were a lot of Democrats maybe worrying about this in private. There were only a few who went really public. So that's why it was interesting seeing him come around and hit almost that DNC mood of now Joe's the best person ever, although it is rare to give up power. But go ahead, please.
No, but he had to do that because Joe Biden did do something. He really sacrificed himself. Joe Biden is a politician's politician. And you cannot deny the history of Joe Biden, and you cannot deny who he was as president. And, for this president, Joe Biden, to leave in this moment and to cite Ben Franklin and the Continental Convention and the Declaration of Independence when he was writing it, saying that he was trying to save the republic. And what's at stake, it's not two personalities, it's the democracy. And that's what people are forgetting in this moment. We go from democracy where you have your rights to someone who could possibly be a dictator. You lose government that we know it. You have loyalty tests. Immigration would be totally different. Abortion would be different. LGBTQ plus people wouldn't have rights. And let's talk about Black folks and brown folks. They are fearful of the browning of America. So that's a whole piece right there. Now, let's get to the other piece of the underdog. Kamala Harris, from my reporting from decades, I don't like the idea of saying underdog because I've seen that before. And Howard Dean probably knows where I'm going. I covered Al Gore and George W. Bush. And I have a picture from a Halloween party when Al Gore donned the underdog costume. And look at what happened. He lost. In this point, she is a strong candidate, but neither candidate can take for granted where they are. And Kamala Harris is not an underdog. She's a strong fighter.